Welcome back everyone to Data Science for Everyone. Today we're going to be talking about questionnaires. Let's get started. Questionnaires are without a doubt the single most popular data collection tools in any research involving human subjects. There are a number of reasons for using questionnaires in your research. You can reach a large and geographically dispersed community at a relatively low cost. You can harvest data from a larger sample than would be possible using any other technique. Anonymity can be offered as well as confidentiality, and the data analysis can be determined from the outset, even as far as coding before your questions have been distributed. Despite being the most popular research technique, questionnaires produce notoriously low response rates unless the researcher administers them personally. One of the most important things to remember is that the questionnaire is required to stand alone. The researcher is rarely looking over the respondent's shoulder while he or she completes the questionnaire. You won't be there to confirm that the respondent understands the questionnaire or to provide additional information. Appearance and content are extremely important if you want to encourage responses. Your questionnaire has to look good and read well. Your instructions need to be clear and plausible. Questionnaire design is a very serious business and can mean the difference between a high response rate and that provides you with the detailed data or a lack of data, which puts you in the position of being able to say very little about your research question. Inadequate design will not only discourage respondents from taking part, but it could also increase measurement error. Now, as we can see here, there are several steps in designing questionnaires. Review the data requirements of the research question. Develop a list of potential research questions to provide required information. Prioritize a list of questions. Evaluate each potential question using the following criteria. Can potential participants understand the question? Are they in a position to answer the question? Will they be prepared to answer the question? Is there ambiguity or bias or potentially offensive content? Determine a form of questions, open-ended, closed, or scaled items. Construct specific wording of each question. Organize the structure of the questionnaire. Evaluate and pilot the questionnaire. Make necessary amendments and distribute. Never omit any of these steps. An effective questionnaire should be designed as a holistic tool. The overall picture should be clear. Begin with a brief introduction, providing a clear and simple instructions. Be concise. Ask questions clearly without ambiguity, bias, or use of jargon or technical language. This is again unless you are, if your particular subjects would expect certain technical terms, and leaving them out would imply that you don't know the subject matter very well. An effective questionnaire should be short enough to be completed in a reasonable time, avoid leading questions, and avoid asking potentially offensive questions. It should also be logical in order of questions. This means providing an obvious pathway through the questionnaire and avoiding complex instructions on where to go next depending on the previous answer. Appear uncluttered and inviting. Don't scare people off with tightly packed questions that are almost impossible to read without a magnifying glass. Provide data that is easily processed. Make sure that you know how you intend to analyze your data before you distribute your questionnaires. Developing questions. The questions in a questionnaire need to be easily understood and easily answered. If they aren't, then you run a high risk of low response and a risk already present for numerous other reasons. Generally speaking, it is useful to structure your questionnaire by asking unthreatening, friendly questions first. Questions that are relevant to the subject but relatively easy to understand. So often, questionnaires open with basic demographic questions first. This is not a very good idea. Who wants to give details about themselves before they have provided any other answers? Keep these questions until the end and at a point at which the respondent may be sick of thinking and will appreciate very basic questions. The important thing about asking questions concerning gender, age, location, and so on is to consider the usefulness of these questions. Serve in your analysis. Start with simple, friendly questions about the topic. Move on to more complex questions as you have engaged the respondent. Leave all questions that require your respondent to express a point of view or an opinion until the last third of the questionnaire. It is difficult to encourage respondents to complete great sections of blank lines in their own words. It demands too much thought and too much time. It is far easier to give a verbal response to an open question, but when it comes to putting your thoughts down on paper, we all take more time and are more concerned about what we are writing. Remember that the descriptive responses will take considerably longer to analyze than replies to simple questions, which is why we never conduct as many interviews as we do questionnaires. Questionnaires provide breadth with some detailed description. For real depth, we need interviews and observations. Think about a holistic picture, not a list of individual questions. Design your questionnaire with the overall function so that you can use techniques such as funneling, which starts off with a very broad question and then progressively narrows down the scope of the questions until it becomes to some specific points. Try to make your overall design as simple and straightforward as possible. One way to avoid confusion is to limit the amount of filtering that you do. Filtering is used to exclude a respondent from a particular question sequence if those questions are irrelevant. But using this too often can confuse people and leave them feeling very unsure about which questions to answer and which to ignore. Closed questions. These questions fall into three major categories: the dichotomous question, the multi-dichotomous question, and the ranked order question. The dichotomous question allows the respondent to choose from two possible responses. The multiple dichotomous question provides a list of possible responses and allows the respondent to select any number of choices from the list. Ranked order question is where respondents are asked to rate or rank each option that applies. Scaled items are often included in questionnaires, although they are data collection technique in their own right. They are attitude measures. You must remember that preparing a scaled attitude measurement involves a lot of work and is rather more than just another closed question in your list of questions. Scaled questions offer greater uniformity of response and therefore are easier to code. There are two broad groups of scaled questions. Unidimensional scales are measurements taken along a single dimension. Only one thing is being measured and it is either more or less. Multidimensional scales are used more complex and they attempt to scale responses along three different dimensions: cognitive, behavioral, and affective. The Likert scale is a bipolar scaling technique which allows a respondent to select a choice that best demonstrates their level of agreement with a given statement. This is an adherent order to the Likert scale, but no indication of the interval measured between each choice. The Likert scale does not measure attitude. It gauges intensity of attitude in relation to other respondents. It provides ordinal data. This can be manipulated, but essentially you have an ordinal measure. The stages for developing a Likert scale are as follows. Construct a list of attitude statements relating to your research question. This is done with everything else using your literature review and research objectives. Structure a response system. The most common of the 5-point scale of strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. These choices are rated as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Arrange your list in a random way, mixing positive and negative statements to prevent people from falling into a habit of ticking one column. Select a random test sample from your target population to test your list and scoring system. Ask each member of your test group to rate the statements based on interest and relevant to the topic, not relating to their own opinion. Score the list obtained from each respondent based on your weighting, then rank the respondent's highest score to lowest score. Select the items you intend to use in your final list, the list that will be given to your actual research sample. To do this, you must carry out a statement analysis and calculate the discriminative power for each or correlate each statement with the overall score. To calculate up the discriminative power, you have to work out which statements discriminate best between the respondents' totals in the upper quartile and those in the lower quartile. You ranked your respondents earlier. For each statement, you can calculate the score of all respondents in the lower and upper quartile, calculate the total weighting, then the weighted mean. The discriminative power is the difference between the weighted means for each quartile. These statements with the highest discriminative power are selected for inclusion in your final scale. You are now ready to construct and administer your Likert scale to your research sample. It is recommended that you have between 10 to 15 statements for your questionnaire, all of which have now been tested for importance in relation to your topic. Remember to mix positive and negative statements to avoid respondents quickly ticking boxes down a single column. The Thurston scale is a way of adding measurement to attitude ratings, where the Likert scale can only rate respondents' attitudes against those of other respondents. The Thurston scale is an interval measure which allows a value to be placed on each choice with an equal appearing interval scale between values. This implies that the scale will reflect the absolute attitudes of respondents rather than their relative attitude. The Thurston scale and constructing it. Construct a list of attitude statements relating to your research question. This is done with everything else using your literature review and your research objectives. You will need around 80 to 100 statements in your initial pool. Unless the help of a panel of judges, usually 50 to 100, this is the most difficult step to complete and is usually the reason so few researchers apply this scale. These judges should be experts in the field and of attitudes being investigated. Judges are then given a list of statements. Judges are asked to rate each statement on an 11-point scale based on the favorableness demonstrated towards the attitude of the statement, 11 being the most favorable, 6 being a neutral statement, and 1 being the least favorable. They are also asked to avoid making personal judgments on the statement, but the score is only in terms of favorableness. The mean value of each statement is then calculated based on the judge's scoring. If the scoring for any statement is scattered over an 11-point scale, then discard this statement. There is clearly no way of measuring its degree of favorableness. Calculate the variability in rating for each statement. Select the statements that are spread evenly along the 11-point scale, allowing you to construct a scale of equal appearing intervals. Depending on how many statements you want, this could mean selecting statements with the mean value closest to the scale points of 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, and so on all the way up to 11. Now construct your questionnaire providing only dichotomous response options of agree or disagree. The GUTTMAN collective scale is the most difficult attitudinal scale to construct and is also the least used of all the attitude measures, perhaps for this reason. The scale relies on a one-dimensional focus on a topic. The GUTTMAN scale is concerned with cumulative scores, a one-dimensional continuum for each topic you wish to investigate. The basis of the cumulative scale is that statements become increasingly more focused. The process of constructing the GUTTMAN scale scalograms begins in the same way that the previous two attitude measures, uh, but then varies. Construct your list of attitude statements relating to your research question. Done with done as with everything else using your literature review and research objectives. You need around 80 to 100 statements in the initial pool. This list is then given to a test group or judges, and they are asked to tick off all statements they agree with. You will then carry out a scalegram analysis, which means that you will arrange responses to give you the best triangular shape. This can involve a lot of manipulation and the removal of some statements. The best triangular shape gives you the list of statements for your scale to be used and given to respondents. The semantic differential scale is a multi-dimensional measure between two bipolar objectives. Respondents must select a point along this scale that represents the direction and intensity of their feelings. The semantic differential scale is used to assess the subjective meanings to a concept. The data is analyzed using factor analysis, which involves a large number of correlations between variables. This measure is designed to identify an individual's beliefs about a concept or objective over three dimensions: activity, the extent to which an object or concept is associated with action; potency, the strength or importance of an object or concept; and evaluation, the overall positive meaning associated with an object or concept. Constructing semantic differential does not include the various stages associated with the attitude measurements. The outcome is based on factor analysis and a simple calculation and comparison between respondents. Factor analysis is only used if to take the analysis further and examine correlations between dimensions. The process of constructing a scale is relatively simple. You decide on the object or concept you wish to assess and construct a list of bipolar adjectives related to that object or concept. There are a number of options available for administering and distributing questionnaires. You need to think very carefully about your target group when you decide on how to reach them. Here's a checklist of questions you need to ask before you decide on the format of your questionnaire. What form of questionnaire would best suit your subjects? What are your own capabilities? What resources do you have? How much time do you have? Is your sample group geographically dispersed? The most common form of questionnaire is paper-based or printed instrument. The most typical forms of distribution are by post, handling them to individuals at group events or leaving them in a prominent position where people are encouraged to complete and return them to a distribution point. The postal questions are the most costly, as you have to enclose a stamped addressed envelope to each for the return. You will also be relying heavily on the willingness of the respondent to complete and return the questionnaire. Distributing paper questionnaires to a group when they are gathered together in a particular location is usually the most successful approach. The term electronic questionnaires is generally used to cover both online questionnaires and questionnaires contained within an email message. It does not cover questionnaires produced in a word processing package and then sent to participants as an attachment. This is still a paper-based questionnaire using a different mechanism for distribution. Research-administered questionnaires usually generate the highest response rate of any questionnaire. Because you approach your subject and you complete the questionnaire by asking the questions and filling out the document according to what they tell you. The most ethical and practical approach to this type of questionnaire is to select a location where your study population can be found. Request permission to engage in the data collection and wait patiently for your designated sample to appear. You usually have to make more than a single visit to your location, and you will have to work out when you should visit in order to reach the optimum sample size and composition. Overall, questionnaire design involves a great deal of common sense and personal experience. It is only by attempting to harvest data on a specific research question that you will come to understand the eccentricities of designing effective questionnaires. Always remain aware of the purpose of the investigation and make sure each question you ask relates to it specifically. If you guys like this video, please comment, subscribe, and hit that like button, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.